Just like the previous lectures, what I would like you to do is to first print out pages 2, 3, and 2, 3, 4, and 5, which are slides 2 to 5 on this particular lecture slides. And what I want you to do is to label the male and female anatomy parts with as many of the names and functions as you possibly can. Because this way, when you view the video, you can focus on listening and taking additional notes as opposed to writing down basic functional definitions. When you are done with taking all of the notes, please upload your work onto Jupyter Ed so that I can give you class participation credit. For this particular lecture series, what I have also done is that I have also included video clip questions such that hopefully it can help you focus on what you're trying to, what is really important in the video clips. And for this particular lecture series, I also want to tell you that the menstrual cycle is going to be a simple diagram that I want to just give you an overview, but the details of which would be followed up by a separate graphing activity that I would like you to do so that you can actually view what happens and how the trends and pattern changes over the 28-day menstrual cycle. All right, let's begin. So how do different animals reproduce? Many of you may have already learned this in middle school, but let's just do a quick review. There are two major types of fertilization. The first type is known as internal fertilization, where the male inserts his reproductive organ into the female's body, assuring that the sperm cells from his body will then be delivered into the female's body, ensuring a higher degree of success. Now, the end result of this could either be internal development, which means the baby grows inside the female's body, or it could also be external, in which case the animal could be laying eggs outside of his body, putting it inside some form of nest, or if not in some form of sand, such as sandy beaches, like in the case of these leatherback turtles, or depositing them inside some form of environment like soil that could keep them warm, or there may be even some forms of incubation. Let's take a look at what are the advantages and disadvantages of both types of fertilization and development. In the case of external fertilization, the male is releasing the eggs into the environment, and then the female will be doing the same thing. Now, the benefit of that is when you can actually release significant numbers of gametes into the environment, which means you can have many, many offsprings in the numbers of hundreds to thousands at a time. But the problem is that when you release all of these gametes outside into the environment, you are subjecting all of the sex cells and the developing embryo into any changes in the environment, including toxins, pollutants, predators, and also the sheer chance that the sperm may not ever find the egg because of underwater currents, so to speak. In the case of internal fertilization, because there may be a higher degree of fertilization, and especially if the organism, such as humans, also utilizes internal development, yes, you cannot produce as many young in comparison to these two examples that you see on the screen, like the salmon and the frogs. However, you ensure a higher degree of success. And also, you would also be providing some form of parental care. Obviously, if you are releasing these sex cells into the environment, there really is little to no parental care that you'll be providing for the young. Some animals would actually look after the eggs after when they lay them to ensure that other animals cannot snatch them. But in some of the other instances, they may not even guard them at all. They just leave them behind and then let nature take its course. So you make sure you know the advantages and disadvantages of it. Now, if you're using internal development, one of the disadvantages is that, yes, while you would be providing parental care, you really cannot have that many youngs to carry at any given time. Which is one of the reasons why you don't often even hear a whole lot about twins being born, not to mention having triplets or quadruplets in the case of humans. Speaking of animals and developing eggs, well, when an organism can lay that many eggs, like in the case of the leatherback turtles, you can see that in a clutch, there could be up to 110 eggs. Each one of the size of these eggs, it's about the size of a golf ball, and in some cases, maybe even smaller. These eggs will hatch after 70 to 80 days. Now, 90% of these eggs will hatch. However, survival rate is actually very, very low. There's only a 1% chance. Um, the reasons is that right after, when the turtles can find a spot and lay the eggs, and that is a challenge for a lot of these animals now because of urbanization and development. A lot of the sandy beaches are now open to more human attendance, in which case it makes it more difficult for these animals to have a natural environment where they can safely and comfortably deposit their eggs. The other problem that they also experience is predators. There are other animals that would track the presence of these animals and the timing when they would lay eggs so that they can go and eat them. All right. We also have examples of human poachers that will go out and snatch these eggs and sell them for various types of reasons and purposes. The other problem is that even after when the baby leatherback turtles are hatched, it would have to be able to find a way into the water. And usually these animals are guided by moonlight. And so therefore, it is not easy for these animals to maintain survival such that they would know when they can come back to the sea and lay the eggs. Now, speaking of all of these fun examples, I can't resist but to share with you one of the clips that I found about how turtles actually mate. So let's take a look at it together.
The mating has begun, and I quietly approach to film the action. Mating is not easy for the female sea turtle. She must swim and rise to breathe for both of them. The male's long tail holds the female and fertilizes the eggs, while claws on his front flippers give him the ability to grasp the female's shell. The commotion doesn't go unnoticed by other males in the area. They flock to the mating pair, which have drifted away from the reef. In competition for a limited number of females, the other males look for ways to dislodge the suitor. One challenger bites his flipper. When that doesn't work, he tries a blast of air bubbles. He tries sticking his head between the mating pair, hoping to wedge them apart. Through it all, the mating male must hang on and tough it out. Fighting back would mean losing his grip, and that's just what his rivals want. Eventually, no less than 4 additional male turtles arrive to challenge the suitor. They all try the same techniques, and it's starting to wear him down. Meanwhile, the female is near exhaustion. The male is only struggling to hold on. The female is struggling to survive. Seeing this incredible struggle in person for the first time gives me a lot of respect for sea turtles. Hours later, the male has outlasted his rivals. He fertilizes the female's eggs, and with luck, his genes will continue on. As if her job weren't hard enough already, the female now faces another tremendous task to lay the eggs, but it must wait until nightfall.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. Here is a chart that basically summarizes what I have shared with you in the last couple of minutes, comparing the differences between fertilization, types of fertilization, and types of development, and also some examples of animals that uses these particular modes of development and fertilization. Now, But regardless of the type of fertilization that the organism uses, one thing to keep in mind is that we're talking about sperms. As you know, sperms contain a flagellum. The flagellum is used for propelling itself towards finding the egg to deliver the genetic material. So no matter what type of fertilization method is used, it needs to have a water or a watery environment for the sperm to go find the egg. So it's impossible for any land living animal, terrestrial animals, to lay the sperm in dry soil on top of any soil and expect it to go find the egg. So usually animals on land will be using internal fertilization, and those at sea can use a combination or a difference between those two. And those are one of this. So this is one of the key points that I want to make sure that it's get across to you. Now, so let's take a look at humans. How do humans perform internal fertilization? Copulation certainly has to happen, in which the penis of the male's body is inserted into the female's vagina. And the main goal is to deliver the sperm such that it can go find the egg, the mature ovum that is sitting inside the fallopian tubes inside the female body, to fertilize it to form a zygote. Each one of these gametes, either the sperm cell or the egg cell, contain a haploid number of chromosomes, meaning they only have 23 chromosomes that are single-stranded each. And when they fertilize and find each other, that's when a zygote is formed, restoring the diploid number. Here is the diagram, and what I have done is I have labeled each one of the each one of these parts, especially the ones that are involved in either the production or delivery of the sperm, with a number next to it. So let's begin. The urethra is a tube that is used for two functions: delivering the urine so that excretion can occur, and there is the urinary bladder right here, or in the process of ejaculation, the muscle, the ring of muscle known as the sphincter, that we use to control when we allow urine to exit the body, it's actually going to be closed so that only sperm cells from the testes will then be exiting outside of the body. This particular structure is known as the penis, which contains the urethra inside. Here is the urethra opening, known as the urethral opening. The scrotum is a thin piece of skin that allows the testes to be kept outside of the male's body so that the sperm cells can be produced at a lower body temperature. And this is really important because if a male wants to produce normal sperms, the body temperature has to be slightly lower. If the temperature becomes elevated, maybe due to the type of underwear that you're using that hugs the scrotum closer to the body, or the type of fabric that the clothing that you're wearing, or having things like fever from suffering from a common cold, that can actually all lead to various forms of mutation. So all the sperm cells are produced inside this structure, and then the tails are going to be developed inside the epididymis, which then later gets delivered through the vas deferens. Now, please be careful. This is a side view only of the male reproductive organ. On your lecture note sheet, I have also given you a small diagram off to the side of it with the front view. During an examination, you do not know which one of these two would be given to you, which is why I gave you both, so that you can become familiar with it. So the sperm would travel through the vas deferens, and then it would pass through three important glands. The first one that it passes by is the seminal vesicle. And the function of this gland is to produce a type of sugar known as fructose. And actually, 2 slides down, you will see that I have given you a breakdown of each one of these that you can use for reviewing and recording your notes. Then the second gland that it passes by is the prostate gland. The prostate gland actually produces a protective fluid. And then following this is the bulbourethral gland, also known as the Cowper gland. And what that does is that it produces an alkaline mucosal secretion. And what it does is that it protects the sperm from the acidic environment inside the vagina, so the sperm doesn't get destroyed upon entry. And then following all of that, the mixture of the 3 fluids plus the sperm cell that's coming off from the testes, that forms the solution known as semen, as you see me have indicated right there. Now, let me show you how this process actually works by showing you a quick video clip. So let's take a look.
The organs of the male reproductive system include the testes, seminiferous tubules, epididymis, ducts, urethra, and penis. The seminal vesicle and prostate and bulbourethral glands produce nourishing fluid for the sperm. The testes subdivide into lobules that contain seminiferous tubules that produce sperm. Sperm moves from the seminiferous tubules to the efferent tubules to the epididymis where they mature. The end of the epididymis forms the ductus deferens or vas deferens. This structure ascends the posterior border of the testes, penetrates the inguinal canal, enters the pelvic cavity, and loops over and around the urinary bladder. The seminal vesicles are glands at the base of the bladder that produce seminal fluid. Together with the ductus deferens, they form the ejaculatory ducts. During ejaculation, these ducts eject sperm into the male urethra, the common passageway for urine and sperm. The prostate gland surrounds the prostatic urethra just below the bladder. The fluid it secretes goes through small ducts into the prostatic urethra. The bulbourethral glands produce alkaline mucus secretions that empty into the urethra. The urethra passes through the penis carrying semen, a mixture of sperm and secretions of the glands. During ejaculation, the smooth muscle sphincter at the base of the bladder closes off to ensure that no urine is expelled and that semen does not enter the urinary bladder. Sperm moves from the seminiferous tubules to the epididymis, to the ductus deferens, to the ejaculatory duct, to the outside of the body by the urethra.
So here's a summary of the major parts that the sperm cell travels through, beginning from the seminiferous tubules inside the testes, followed by the epididymis, vas deferens, urethra, and then the penis. So let's explore the female reproductive system. The female reproductive system involves a number of organs. And the ovaries that the female has that's encased inside her body, they were actually produced at the time of birth. And then what happens is every month, the ovaries, one on the left and one to the right, will take turns ovulating one of these eggs. And it will be sitting inside the fallopian tube in here, somewhere in here, so that it can wait for possible fertilization. Now, this particular structure, that it's a strong muscular structure, this is actually the uterus itself. And the lining of the uterus is known as the endometrium. There is actually conditions known as endometriosis, where scar tissues or cysts could be formed in this lining, which makes it more difficult for a female to become fertilized later on in life. All right. And then if you take a closer look at this, a female actually has three major openings in her body. Here is the urethra. This is actually the urinary bladder where urine is stored. And then right behind it, there's a separate opening called the vagina, also known as the birth canal. Here is where the baby would be developed. So if fertilization happens in here, then it travels all the way down into this giant, strong muscular muscle where it grows for the next 9 months. And then the baby exits through this channel, this canal, known as the birth canal. Now, further towards the back of this, there's a third opening in the female's body known as the anus. That's where solid waste exits and comes out of the body. And right outside the uterus in this area is known as the cervix. This is the area where the penis structure would then be inserted to deliver the sperms for fertilization to take place. Here is an interesting side view that I figure it would be of interest to all of us, because this is actually a diagram that shows a cross-section of the female's body with all of the major organs in its respective positions. Now, what's interesting is look at how much some of these organs get shifted during the time of woman's pregnancy as it progresses over time. You can see that what used to be the intestine down here, which is in relative position closer to the navel area of the female's body, it gets shifted all the way up, almost up to the chest area. And where the urinary bladder used to be down here, and notice how the uterus is positioned almost above it, well, that gets compressed more and more as the fetus grows inside a woman's body, which is one of the reasons why pregnant women have a tendency to go to the bathroom and urinate more often. and sometimes not in significant volumes at all. It's just because that the urinary bladder is being compressed all the time. Now, here is another diagram that you can see it from a different point of view, and you can actually see the shifting of all of the internal digestive organs that are positioned here. And you can see how dramatic the organ gets changed. And what's also amazing is to see how flexible the human body can be in light of the conception and growing of a fetus of another human being. Oftentimes, I get asked very interesting questions during class time, which is something I dearly miss working with you guys. If you look at these two images, you can probably tell right away that here is a little feet, a footprint of a baby from inside of the mother's body. And here is where you see the baby pushing upwards. So you see the little digit, the little toes are right here. They could also possibly be the backs of the arms too, where you're looking at the finger, the knuckle pushing up against the mom's body. I have a simpler one of this of my own picture when I was pregnant, and it's actually very interesting and quite fun. And I remember times where sometimes students would ask, "Oh, can I touch your tummy?" And it's really cute. And oftentimes students get really shocked by how much the baby can push back, because the baby can also sense the pressure that you're exerting on the amniotic sac, especially when it just so happened to be touching the walls of the amniotic sac at the same time while you're touching, say, the tummy of a pregnant woman. And some students would even say that it's a bit freaky. Well, that this is the natural human process of conception and growth as well. Okay, so what are the processes in which sperm enters into a female body? Well, after a sperm enters the vagina of the female, it will then pass by the cervical area known as the cervix, and then directly into the uterus. Once it's inside the uterus, it will be looking for one of the two fallopian tubes, and there's a one to the left and there's one to the right. Again, to help you visualize what the female reproductive part looks like from the front side of a female, I've given you a much simpler diagram on slide number 3, which is page 2 of your lecture note sheet, so that you can see what it looks like from the front and compared to the side view of all this. Now, after when fertilization takes place, the development process almost happens instantaneously, and it's really interesting. So I figured instead of listening to me describing how it works, why not show you how it works in this process, including the process of implantation. So let's take a look. Oops, I'm sorry. There's a little bit of a problem here. Let me go fix it.